Good evening, everyone. It's 7 o'clock on July 29th, and this is a regular scheduled meeting of the Cleveland Heights Planning Commission. Can I have a roll call, please?
Here. Here.
Present.
Here.
Here.
And I believe Judy Miles is absent this evening. She emailed me a couple of days ago and let me know that she wouldn't be here. For the benefit of everyone in the audience, this is a public meeting that is recorded, and so if you're here in regard to a case or you'd like to speak to the commission about any of the business before us today, you will have to take an oath and to testify that you'll tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, and speak to us from the podium when you're called up. After you identify yourself by your name and your address, you'll be able to make your comments to the commission on the subject that you're interested in giving us your opinion. First thing we need to do, we have minutes from our April 16th meeting.
This conference will now be recorded.
Thank you. And has everybody had a chance, all the commissioners, to see the minutes? Any comments or changes? I didn't think that'd be necessary. I'll sign these and we'll pass them on. So those will be approved. The next thing is we'll start our hearing with the first case, which is project number 2605, Take 5 Oil Change, Aurelius Family Properties Limited at 2100 Lee Road. And I believe Brooke will take us through the case. We will pause the meeting until she returns.
Sorry about that. The first case we have is project 265, Take 5 Oil Change at 2100 Lee Road. And they're requesting a revised conditional use permit to reflect a change in business ownership. The subject property, permanent parcel number 684-2223, is a lot northwest of the Cedar and Taylor Roads that's the Lee Road and East Derbyshire Road intersection. And the entire lot has an area of about 23,700 square feet. The property is zoned S2 mixed use and is surrounded by other businesses also zoned S2 mixed use. To its north, Cleveland Heights High School, also zoned S2 mixed use, to its east across Lee Road, and single-family residence zoned A single family to its west. The applicant has no plans to change the existing building, use, appearance, or operations, and is only requesting to revise the conditional use permit to reflect the change in business ownership. The business is now owned by Take 5 Properties, who will continue to operate Take 5 Oil Change. The business provides oil changes and light automotive maintenance services. The operation employs up to 6 full-time staff members, and hours of operation are from Mondays through Saturdays between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m., and on Sundays between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. The facility consists of 3 service bays and can accommodate up to 3 customers at a time. The business serves about 50 to 60 customers per day on average. And the applicant has parking lot signage affixed to on-site trees, and staff is asking that Planning Commission require the applicant to move any signage attached to trees and to reinstall them using a permanent freestanding sign support or another approved mounting structure in compliance with the city sign ordinance. And these are the standards under which a conditional use permit can be issued. And staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve the revision to the applicant's conditional use permit to reflect the change in business ownership with the following conditions. This use is to not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other properties in the immediate vicinity or create a nuisance for adjacent properties. The applicant is to work with city staff to resolve any complaints from neighbors. The applicant is to return to the Planning Commission to update their conditional use permit if any significant changes are made to the site, location, capacity, or operations. Any signage is to be reviewed and approved by the Architectural Board of Review. The applicant is to submit a final landscaping plan to be reviewed and approved by the zoning administrator, and all landscaping and installation of this use are to be completed within 6 months of Planning Commission approval.
Does anyone on the commission have any questions for Brooke?
Right. Right. Sure. Yeah, we're reviewing it during our zoning code rewrite too.
Okay, any other questions for Brooke? Seeing no more, and the fact that I did not get any public communication on this case, and I only see one gentleman here that I don't recognize. Are you the applicant, sir? In the back row? For this case? Okay. Is anyone here on behalf of the applicant? It doesn't appear to be the case. So I think we can move on to a motion. Do I hear a motion to approve the permit? Okay. And do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, we should take a vote for approval. And I'm just going to ask for all in favor to say aye.
Aye.
I believe it's a unanimous vote. And so the motion passes. Is there any discussion beyond what we've already had? All right, we can move on, and the project is approved for the change in the conditional use permit. Next case, I'll turn it over to you, Brooke.
Yes, this is project number 266, the upcoming Culvers at 3907-27 Mayfield Road, and they're requesting a conditional use permit to construct a drive-through lane at the proposed new Culvers restaurant and a re-subdivision in order to join the 3 on-site parcels. The first subject property, PPN 68369, is the first corner lot on Mayfield between Vandemar Street and Noble Road, where the former Center Mayfield Theater was located. The lot has an area of 63,563 square feet. The second and third subject properties are the second and third lots northeast of the Vandemar Street and Mayfield Road lots northeast, of the Vandemar Street and Mayfield Road intersection. They have total areas of 7,550 square feet and 7,750 square feet, respectively. The first property is zoned C2 local retail and is surrounded by other businesses also zoned C2 local retail to its north and south. Single-family residences zoned A single family to its north and west, and businesses zoned C3 general commercial to its east. The second and third properties on this site are zoned A single family and currently consist of single family residences. When the parcels are joined as proposed in the re-subdivision request, the new combined parcel will be treated as a C2 local retail, just because that's the majority of the parcel zoning designation. And this is where the drive-through location will be on the building. The applicant is constructing a new Culver's restaurant on the site, and they're requesting to include this drive-through lane. Restaurants are permitted uses in C2 local retail districts, but drive-through facilities in association with a permitted retail restaurant or service use are conditionally permitted and require a conditional use permit granted by the Planning Commission. And the proposed new building will be 4,650 square feet. Culver's expects to employ about 20 full-time employees and between 50 and 60 part-time employees. Approximately 12 employees are anticipated to work during the peak shift, and the applicant anticipates that this location will generate about 700 transactions per day. Hours of operation will be between the hours of 10 a.m. and 10 p.m. every day. And the drive-through lane will be located in the southeast corner of the lot, northeast of the building. There are 5 queuing spaces in the drive-through lane and 8 waiting spaces in the northwest of the building. The parking lot and drive aisles will be used to support safe and adequate customer and employee access, vehicular circulation, and parking. Shrubs, trees, and buffer yards with a width of at least 10 feet separate the drive-through lane from the pedestrian right-of-way. Landscaping and buffer yards will be installed throughout the entire property's perimeter, as well as benches that will be located along the pedestrian right-of-way. A patio with outdoor seating will be located west of the building. The dumpster will be located east of the building and has the required screening. The site is required to have a total of 16 parking spots, and the applicant is proposing to have a total of 53. They also have 2 on-site bicycle parking spaces northwest of the outdoor patio. And due to the numerous proposed on-site parking spaces, Mayor Petras did consider recommending land bank parking, but because of the number of employees they have, the access points for vehicles, and the intended layout and circulation, planning staff alongside Mayor Petras concluded that the applicant should be required to maximize the use of permeable pavers in all feasible locations, but we're okay with the total number of parking spaces. But we also asked that the Planning Commission ask the applicant to move the bicycle parking spaces closer to one of the entrances. And the applicant is requesting a re-subdivision as well to join the 2 Vandemar Street lots to the main Mayfield Road parcel between Vandemar Street and Noble Road to create a cohesive site. And the resulting parcel will have a total area of 78,863 square feet or 1.8 acres. It'll have 265 feet of frontage, and it will be 282 feet deep. And these are the standards under which a conditional use permit can be issued. And staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve the applicant's request for a conditional use permit to construct a drive-through lane at the proposed Culver's restaurant and a re-subdivision in order to join the 2 Vandemar parcels to the main Mayfield Road parcel, as shown on the submitted and approved site plans with the following conditions. This use is to not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other properties in the immediate vicinity or create a nuisance for adjacent properties. The applicant is to work with city staff to resolve any complaints from neighbors. The applicant is to return to the Planning Commission to update their conditional use permit if any significant changes are made to the site location, parking availability, capacity, or operations. Hours of operation are to be limited to between 10 a.m. and 10 p.m. The applicant is to maximize the use of permeable pavers in all feasible locations. The applicant is to relocate bicycle parking spaces to be closer to one of the entrances. Vehicles waiting for service at the drive-through facility are not to be within the public right-of-way. The applicant is to obtain all required variances, design review approvals, and building permits. The applicant is to submit a final detailed landscaping plan to be reviewed and approved by the zoning administrator. The final re-subdivision plat is to be signed by the Director of Law and Director of Planning and Development prior to submittal to the county recorder. And all required construction, landscaping, and installation of this use is to be completed within 36 months of Planning Commission approval.
Thank you, Brooke. Any questions of Brooke? Jessica?
Given that planning had previously looked at Noble Road corridor and had completed a study on it for walkability, livability, and adding to the quality of life for the greater neighborhood, how is that taking into consideration for this proposal?
Yeah, so the Noble Market study that was done last year actually demonstrated that residents did want some type of restaurant or retail in the area. We haven't had any public comments for this specifically, but in passing, we've heard that people are excited about it.
Bob?
Yeah, when I first started to participate in these discussions, well before I was on the commission, there was a Get-Go gas station proposed at this site. And there was a lot of community opposition to that. It was a convenience store and a large gas station. And that needed special zoning approval and was turned down by the commission and by the city. So I know that the residents who remember that proposal are probably very happy with the alternative being a much improved option than what was proposed back then. Personally, I always thought it was a shame that the city regulations at that time didn't give some additional protection to the existing, the Center Mayfield Theater, which had the second floor above the theater building. That the city at that point had no power to review and approve or deny that proposal. And the applicant, when the city turned down the Get-Go gas station, just said, fine, I'll tear it down, and did, without any city approval other than a building permit. So I thought that was a shame, and of course it's, crying over spilled milk at that time, but that history actually taught me something about our regulations needed to be, in a case like that, stronger.
Other questions? Go ahead, Jessica.
I guess specifically, there's 2 homes being proposed for removal for parking, and that's for parking that's not necessary to meet code for the restaurant to be there. So I guess that's kind of why I'm prying. How did the study meet the needs, for replacing homes with parking? Like, how is that balancing out walkability and densifying the greater Noble area?
I wouldn't say it necessarily contributes to the walkability of the area. The proposed use is a permitted use, so they could build the restaurant with or without the drive-through lane. And accessory parking on single-family lots is also a permitted use. So it's allowed. It's really just a question of whether or not the drive-through lane is being approved by the Planning Commission.
Anyone else?
I just wanted to make a comment that I do think having the one drive apron on Noble is helpful in regards to making sure that this is a little bit more pedestrian friendly. Typically for a drive-through or some sort of use like this, you'll see a lot more drive aprons, and also the right in and right out off of Mayfield is super helpful as well. Where is the bike parking currently? Sorry, I couldn't.
This little blue box right here is
blue
where
box.
it is right now.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Bike parking.
Yeah. I think it would probably make
I
more
see it.
sense to have that on Mayfield.
Parking for the cars.
Yeah, it's for a baby bike, okay, yeah. I'm sure, do we know how many bicycles can park there? I'm sorry, it might,
I believe it's just 2.
okay. Just, I have one really minor question. There's, on the left-hand side, there is a notice of proposed bench. And there's a little arrow pointing to something that, bench, I don't understand what that is.
Yeah, I think they're just benches for people to just sit on.
It just seems like a weird location.
Along the sidewalk.
It's far from the restaurant, and it's right next to the street that is adjacent to the houses. I realize it's a very minor thing.
Sure.
It seems curious, since it is in front of us.
Yeah, the applicant could probably speak more to it. I believe they wanted to separate the use and the vehicular access from the pedestrian area with the landscaping, and then added the benches on that side as well.
Well, the landscaping is certainly
Sure.
critically important. It's just the bench seems in an odd location, and you wonder who's going to sit there.
Any other comments or questions? Jessica?
Yeah, I'm still just struggling with losing 2 homes on a block of a residential neighborhood for parking. Could you walk me through why the site plan required, like, were there other versions that had the drive lanes configured differently that didn't consider those two parcels?
There weren't. The only plans that we've gotten had, they included those two lots as part of the parking and circulation for vehicles. So we haven't gotten any other proposals.
You know, if those two houses were kept, they would certainly be somewhat overwhelmed by the commercial, by the commercial use in the parking. So I'm not sure it would be a very good place to continue living, but.
To be fair, there was a grocery store there prior, historically.
Right. Historically, yeah. Okay.
I know that the mayor and planning staff would prefer that it's one cohesive site. They would prefer it not to be broken up in that way.
Anybody else before I have a question?
I did have one question about the lighting, since there are still homes that are going to be right near there. Just want to make sure that there's no lighting issues, any lights from the parking lot going directly into people's houses. That might be a concern.
Right, yeah, that would be part of their landscaping plan would have to demonstrate that it follows the code and it's not too bright.
I have a question, more of a technical question. I see that their application is combining both the conditional use permit application for the drive-through along with the lot re-subdivision. We've normally done those as separate motions in the past, but it's okay now to go ahead and do this as a combo with a single motion?
Yes.
Okay. And am I correct to assume that I believe the developers had purchased those two homes long before they submitted the plans for this?
Yes, they're in their name now.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any other questions from the commission? Jessica?
The considerations, the conditions here, I see, I think Bob mentioned the bench, and there's a little bit of landscaping. There's a 4-foot tall fence. Is that sufficient for adding traffic directly adjacent to properties that previously did not have it?
Is the, which fence, I'm sorry?
The 4-foot tall wood fence.
In the rear?
Yeah.
Is it, you're asking if it's tall enough?
Yep.
Yes. Yeah, that's code conforming.
Because does it say 6 foot on the other side?
Yeah.
I believe so. I believe it's 6 feet on the end because in a front yard, it can only, the maximum height is 4 feet. So they have the buffer yard, which suffices as well between the use and the neighboring residences.
Sufficient vegetation that would be dense enough to block light and noise?
Yes, according to the code, yes.
Did they provide the information on the actual vegetation they were installing, or is it just hypothetical?
They do. They have a landscaping plan that specifies that.
Okay.
With respect to that last issue, I assume that the shrubbery would be evergreen, so it would be there and useful in the winter as well as in the other months of the year?
I'm not positive. I can share the landscaping plan with you with the details.
I would think that would be the case, but you certainly wanted to give as much screening as possible. And of course, if it's not evergreen, then it would be fairly transparent during the winter, other than snow.
Yeah, our landscaping consultant did look it over, and they provided some recommendations for different species and trees and things like that. So I think that they've come to a understanding, and they have changed to what was recommended by them.
One quick other point: have we had any specific comments from the residents who are immediately to the west of the site?
We have not.
I remember when the get-go was proposed, there was a lot of activity by the residents, as you can imagine. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Any other comments? Seeing no more, I'll ask the gentleman in the back row again, if this is the case that you're here for, sir. Yes, sir. Please come on up to the podium. We're going to ask you to take an oath. And our attorney will swear you in, and after he's done doing that, we'll get your name and address and take your comments.
Do you affirm the testimony that you're about to give is the truth and nothing but the truth? Just say I do.
Thank you. We need your name and address, and then we'll take your comments, sir.
Maybe longer to develop a site plan that is considered cognizant of. Sure. Is that better?
Oh, yeah.
Cognizant and very conscientious of Mayfield Road and the need to be pedestrian forward and aware and in harmony with the adjacent environment. Previous site plans have had the building away from Mayfield Road a bit and pulled away from the corner there. And it was through the collaboration of city staff and our team that came together to formulate a plan. The franchisee and Culver's had a public meeting with the community back in May that was very well received. A lot of the landscaping and one of the folks on the commission mentioned about the benches, intentional. They're based on what the community wanted to see. The benches along Vandemar there, creating additional pedestrian elements. This site or this landscape plan is the updated landscape plan that I think we sent over this morning that addressed the landscape consultant's comments. If I may come around a bit. So we had the bike rack here on the northwest corner. We moved it to this location, the arrow off the screen. This is now the bike location. At the end of the day, we think this site plan is one that embraces the community, embraces all of the comments that we have, most all of the comments that we have received to date, and tried to be very intentional about the impacts of the nature of the development and also fitting within the surrounding community, pulling the access on Noble as far north as we could, providing a right in, right out access onto 322 with the theater before it was full access. You all travel that road every day. I travel it on occasion when I'm up this way. Full access is taking your life into your hands, most rush hours. And so, again, think that this site plan accomplishes what our client hopes to do here, and also fits with the community. If you haven't experienced a Culver's, and there's more of them coming into being, they embrace community. Their model is an owner-operator model, and that owner-operator, generally speaking, local to the community in which the Culver's is located. I don't know that an owner-operator for this location has been established, but Wildcat Dirt Holdings is a subsidiary of Lakeshore Burger Company. Josh Clark and his team own 26 or 27 Culvers in Northeast Ohio and Wisconsin. And the Culvers brand, known for hospitality, known for embracing community. In a lot of communities that you go to, you find the high schoolers employed at the Culvers and the like, and it's a gathering place. Support the various civic groups and the like, and again, excited to be part of Cleveland Heights here, and appreciate any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one when you're ready for me.
Yeah, are we going to take questions of the applicant first, or is it public first?
From the applicant, it's fine.
Okay, so Bob, you're up first.
Yeah, I have three very small questions. I think they're small. About how many bicycles could park in that bike rack? Just ballpark.
So there are two there, but there's also a bike rack, existing bike rack in the right of way on Mayfield. I think it potentially holds 2 or 4 additional.
It just seems to me that, for a use this big, 2 spaces for bikes as opposed to maybe 4 spaces, it's a bit of just, kind of saying it's done, but it couldn't really accommodate many.
How many would you like?
Well, I'll just say my own. I have no idea if anyone else agrees. I would say like 4 rather than 2.
Done.
Well, that's my, don't say done just from me, but that was my comment. This is an easy one. Where is the pedestrian entrance into the store? I don't see it highlighted.
In the front.
Right in the front, okay. So,
There's also access, more folks in the parking lot through the entrance on the north side, but
okay, because I figured since most of the customers will be coming from the parking lot, I just couldn't quite see where they will enter the building. So obviously, if they're in the parking lot, they're going to want to enter from the rear of the building since that's where they are. I mean, it's nice to have something in the front.
For those that drive, you're right. Again, back to where I started, this isn't the first plan.
Yeah.
Okay. We had a couple of different plans with the front door turned north.
Uh-huh.
And in talking with city staff, we recognized the need to be a little bit more pedestrian-centric with our front door.
And I completely agree that there should be a door in the front because there will be some people who walk there, because there are people who live close by. Not everyone will be coming from the parking lot. So that's good you have the entrance in the front as well. And the final question is, that area immediately to the west or to the left of the building, is that outdoor dining? It's not labeled.
It's outdoor patio.
Right, okay.
So it's not, Culver's is,
They don't serve
you go in and you order.
Right.
And then you can be inside, outside, you're given a placard.
Right.
If you order for dine in, and they'll serve you on the patio if you're there.
Okay, good. I didn't see the labeling of it, but that's what it looked like. Thank you.
Other questions for the applicant, anybody? Jenner?
Does Culver's have a model where they have a pedestrian walk-up window?
Not outside of California.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering because my fellow member here was talking a lot about making sure that this is maybe more pedestrian oriented. We've got a lot of different plans about this space, and maybe considering a pedestrian walk-up window would be something that might help alleviate some of those concerns. People on the street, you see that regularly on Mayfield, Dairy King, there's people lined up all the way down the block. So it'd be very cool if we could nod to that.
I will pass that along.
Thank you.
Anyone else? And there are no further questions. You may take a seat, sir. Is there anyone here from the audience who would like to address the commission about this project? See, no one is interested in addressing the commission about this. Is there any further discussion before we have a roll call? Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that totally understand the rest of the commission's feeling that there might be a little bit of tension with the drive-through as well as replacing the two homes with parking, especially when you read the purpose statement of the C2 district that it's supposed to, let's say, cluster commercial establishments and concentrate new retail businesses and buildings that typically locate side by side in order to promote and encourage pedestrian activity. And parking and driveways are generally located so as not to disrupt the pedestrian activity. However, do want to commend the applicant because I do feel that this flow of traffic is probably about as good as you could do to get the cars as far away from that pedestrian activity as possible. So it looks like most people are probably going to be entering off of the side street, and then the right in, right out is also located right at the very edge of the commercial district, providing as little breakup of that pedestrian flow as possible. And then the addition of the landscaping and the outdoor seating and the entrance right up on the pedestrian street seems like the applicant has really made a significant effort here to try to bring this as in line with the vision for this zone as it could possibly be. And then also, I think that the restaurant is going to have more pedestrian activity and more engagement with the street than the current site does, which is a vacant lot right now. So I think that this is ultimately bringing it more in line with the vision that the code has. Besides that, it's also increasing our tree canopy. Love to see that on the site. And I would also support an amendment to what is being approved here to require the second bike rack. So there's 4 total bikes that are able to park.
Okay, we can talk about putting that in the motion. Any other comments or questions?
More of a question. I guess as setting a precedence for allowing a more than double amount of parking than would be necessary kind of still gives me a bit of pause. Just thinking in the future, how can you reasonably, that's all. That's what I'm stuck on.
Yeah, that's a difficult situation because the applicant is complying with our zoning overall for the property. If there's nobody else, I'd like to make just a couple of comments. When I first heard about Culver's coming here, I was taken aback a little bit because I served 10 years ago on the tail end of the Master Planning Commission, and I still remember thinking what we ultimately were hoping to get on this property, which I don't know how many years have passed, Bob, 10 maybe.
Yeah.
And we've gotten no development. And so when I heard about Culver's, I talked to a few people that I knew lived on the street, and I was really struck by how pleased they were to have Culver's come in. It kind of took me by surprise because I thought, oh, a huge fast food place? What's different from the big gas station we said no to? But then after the public meeting and all we've gotten 0 comments in opposition to this project, and the thoughtfulness of the design. When I first opened my packet and looked at the elevations and so forth, I thought, why the heck is the building sideways? And then it dawned on me, you're bringing it up to the street to kind of create harmony with the neighborhood. And so I guess the point I'm trying to make is the process worked. And I think a site plan was developed for a very busy operator. This is going to add a lot of traffic on Noble Road and coming out on Mayfield Road, but I think the decision to put the entry back away from the red light was a good one for safety, for whether you're in an automobile or a bicycle or on foot. And I have to say the work they did ahead of time to make the lot big enough so that it wouldn't infringe on those 2 properties back there was also a good move. And the operating company did their homework along with our city staff to make a plan that the residents have embraced. And so I salute you for doing that. Not really what I was thinking was going to go there someday, but I have to accept the reality of the situation and welcome the development to our city and the thoughtfulness that went into all the work and the planning to present Culver's in maybe a different fashion than I've seen them in a lot of areas when I've had to pull off the road while traveling to get something to eat. So that's my comment. Seeing no others, is anyone willing to make the motion to start this?
Yeah, the applicant has one.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, please.
So I appreciate you indulging me again. As it relates to the conditions, we're fine with those. The second bike rack, we're happy to do it. For everything that we're trying to accomplish here, the space that another bike rack takes up is very, very small. But condition 5, I would respectfully like to make an amendment to that if all of you are willing to accept it. Applicant is to maximize the use of permeable pavers or permeable pavement in all feasible locations, subject to geotechnical evaluation of soils and a finding of adequate infiltration. Thank you.
Is that your amendment?
That's
Okay, could you read that again one more time? I was looking for the language as I was hearing it.
sorry. I'm suggesting an amendment. It's completely up to you all whether you take it or not. It's just I'm an engineer and sometimes I fall back on my engineering roots. So I would propose to modify condition 5 to say the applicant is to maximize the use of permeable pavers or permeable pavement in all feasible locations, subject to geotechnical evaluation of soils and finding of adequate infiltration.
Thank you. Brooke, did you get all of that?
Geotechnical findings of soils and
Subject to geotechnical evaluation of soils and finding of adequate infiltration.
thank you.
In other words, happy to do an infiltration practice, but it's kind of hit or miss here in the glacial till areas as to whether infiltration is actually feasible. So just on the record, so there's no misunderstanding going forward as we get into staff reviews and the like. My suggestion. Thank you.
Matt?
Yeah, question for the applicant. So as somebody who doesn't have an engineering background, what is the difference between what was originally there and the new language? So the difference between a paver and pavement?
Sometimes it's cost. Sometimes it's how much area you can do with a paver versus pavement. Sometimes it's just applicability. And so I don't know what we don't know at this point. We've done a fair amount of due diligence. The infiltration testing isn't something that's been complete yet, but we've put it on the geotech's list of things to do. We want to do the right, back to the site plan, right? We want to do the right things, but we'd like to have a little bit more tools in our toolbox rather than just having to go a paver route that gets subjected to a specific make and model and the like, as opposed to pavement that most any contractor these days can provide.
Sir, if I could just ask another clarifying question to that in maybe layperson's terms. You're talking about the ability of the water to percolate?
Correct.
Okay, so it's just a
Give
matter
it a
of,
chance to infiltrate into the ground
yes,
versus just put some pipes in the ground, collect it, detain it, and then outlet it over a longer period of time into the city's storm drainage network.
okay. Any other questions? Jessica?
Yeah, just clarifying, so we're giving more definition to feasible locations so that it's more clarity. That's essentially what you're asking for.
Correct?
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, sir. I think we're ready to make a
Thank you.
motion now. Would anybody like to make the motion? Well, I'll do it.
I'll take a try.
All right.
And I'll add the amendments that we discuss here, but I'd like to move project number 26-06 Culvers 3907 27 Mayfield with both A conditional use permit to construct a drive-through, and B, the re-subdivision in order to join the two Vandemar parcels. That's with the 11 conditions with updates to condition 5 to add language about permeable pavement subject to geothermal evaluation of the soil and findings of infiltration. And then with number 6 to update it so that not just relocate the parking spaces closer to the entrance, but also so that there's a total of 4 bike parking.
Okay. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Not hearing any. The motion passes. Congratulations. Thank you all. Welcome to Cleveland Heights. All right, we have one last case that we're going to be going through tonight. This is another project we've been working on for quite some time. Project number 2607 is the culmination of that work. So Brooke, if you'd take us through the case.
Thank you. Thank you. I can't really see. Okay. This is project number 267, accessory dwelling units zoning text amendments. And just to give some background on what an ADU is, and it's an accessory dwelling unit. We would allow, under this proposed legislation, detached, attached, or internal. And other words for these are also mother-in-law suites, granny flats, carriage houses, which already exist in the city, and garage apartments. And they're currently banned in Cleveland Heights by our initial zoning code, but we have carriage houses that are non-conforming, legal non-conforming structures. And some of the benefits of ADUs include aging in place. They could be accessible homes for older adults, caregivers, people with mobility disabilities, and allows residents to stay on their properties as they age. Community benefits, they can help reduce housing challenges by adding more affordable housing options, allowing more people to live in the community in which they work while preserving diversity and community character. Housing friends and relatives. Friends and family can stay together while also maintaining separate lives and privacy. And ADUs can often make use of infrastructure that already exists in Cleveland Heights neighborhoods, which leads to environmental benefits as well. And because zoning codes are living, breathing documents, ordinance number 142, 2026, these are zoning text amendments that would permit ADUs in addition to our existing code. They were introduced by council on July 6th and referred to Planning Commission. And we're asking you to make a recommendation to council with any modifications to the legislation as it's presented today. And And some of the background research to how we got to this point. In 2024, planning staff worked alongside the Cuyahoga County Planning Team to complete the ADU study, which essentially asked if ADUs could provide benefits and be a good fit for the city. This was also presented to the Planning Commission in October of 2024, where we received public comments and feedback regarding this as well. At the end of 2024, we held an ADU design competition to explore the design ideas of residents as well as the local design community had about what ADUs could look like in Cleveland Heights. And in July of 2025, we compiled all the feedback to develop a draft of the zoning changes, which had third-party firm Kronberg Urbanists and Architects review it and provide suggestions for revisions. And following those revisions, we released that draft to the public in August of 2025 to consider what adjustments residents think that we should make. And we also held many community engagement events to discuss the future of ADUs in the city. And in March of this year, released a second draft of zoning changes as well as our community engagement report summarizing the outcomes and findings from the events. And the survey was the most direct way that we received feedback from residents on the drafted ADU legislation, and we had a great response rate with 645 total respondents. Xavier and I also held 9 pop-up tabling sessions throughout the city, which served to broaden the reach of the survey and educate people about what ADUs are. And in recognizing that need for education, we created 3 educational videos for social media where Xavier explained what an ADU is. He brought viewers to a local carriage house and visited a structure in University Heights similar to what a newly constructed ADU would be like in the city. And these 3 videos got a collective 27,000 views between Facebook and Instagram. And all of these engagement activities were really helpful in gathering the input needed to tailor the drafted legislation.
Thanks for that overview, Brooke. I'm now going to walk through the legislation and more in particular and go over the specific zoning changes. So most importantly, tonight, the biggest topic is that the zoning changes will create this new section 1121.13, which has most of the ADU regulations. On the screen are the other sections that are going to be affected. So the definitions in the zoning code, the rules around lot coverage, the max height for accessory building and structures, and then our carriage house regulations as well. Excuse me. Here we go. So first, where the ADUs will be conditionally permitted will be in the A, or we're proposing in the proposal in the current legislation, is in the AA, A, and B districts. We're proposing that ADUs be conditionally permitted, meaning that they would require a conditional use permit. So this was one area where we responded to some of the feedback from the community about concerns over privacy and noise. And we felt that making ADUs conditionally permitted would allow greater control and greater city oversight. And we're proposing only allowing 1 ADU per lot. The types of ADUs that would be allowed in the legislation are attached and detached ADUs. So internal ADUs, which would be something like a basement conversion, would not be allowed. ADUs would be allowed in the rear, in the side yard. The max size of the ADU would be up to 800 square feet for lots that were under 6,000 square feet. For larger lots, you can have an ADU up to 1,000 square feet. So this is another area where we responded to community feedback. Before we went out to the community, initially we thought 1,000 square feet would be the right amount. What we heard is that people felt that the size of the ADU should be tailored to the lot size better. And on this, I know this is not in this specific section that we're talking about, but we did want to mention that in addition to that maximum size for the ADU, there will be a lot coverage maximum of 60%. So that means for some smaller lots that don't have as much permeable area, they won't be able to build an ADU that's 800 square feet. In this graph I'm showing here is some of the research that we did. And this shows, on the left-hand side in the gray bar, at a 60% lot coverage limit, on average, lots that are between 4,000 and 5,000 square feet have about 560 square feet of permeable area. So those smaller lots on average will not be able to build up to the 800 square foot ADU. The max height allowed for ADUs would be 24 feet. The setback that would be required would be 5 feet from the rear and side property lines. This is another area where we responded to some of the community concerns about privacy. So we have an owner occupancy requirements. So that means that the owner of the property would need to live in either the ADU or the primary dwelling. And we wanted to clarify that the same home-based business rules would also apply to an ADU. So meaning somebody could get a conditional use permit to have a home-based business in their ADU. You know, think of somebody like an architect. Looking at Chuck Miller. But, for parking, we're proposing that an ADU provide no additional parking, but should they want to add more parking, they'd be able to have 200 square feet in addition to the maximum at a lot size. So we're trying to build the flexibility for people. In addition, constructing an ADU would be a reason to reduce your enclosed parking requirements. So just a reminder, most single family homes in Cleveland Heights are required to have 2 enclosed parking spaces. So if you wanted to convert your garage into an ADU, this would allow that. In summary, this is from our presentation and our third-party review from Kronberg and Associates. And these are some of the recommendations that they have for people to, really allow ADUs as many to be built. And there's some places where we align and some places where we don't. We don't align in that they recommend allowing up to 2 ADUs per lot. They don't recommend having an owner occupancy requirement, and they recommend allowing ADUs in all residential districts. So we don't feel that that's appropriate for our community. We think 1 ADU is right for now. An owner occupancy requirement is appropriate, and then ADUs should be limited to the single family and 2-family districts. But we do align with the best practices on lot coverage, not requiring additional parking, this idea of legalizing the existing vernacular, which is what we're trying to do with our existing carriage houses. There's a lot of information on this slide, but the gist of it is that we want to give a bit of a reality check on the amount of ADUs that will be built. So even though the single family and 2-family properties, that's 90% of Cleveland Heights roughly, those properties that have 800 square feet of pervious area to build an ADU, that gets to a smaller amount. Now you're looking at under 3/4 properties in Cleveland Heights. And ADUs are really expensive to build. Those numbers on the right are from our county study. More recently, that's from 2 years ago. Inflation has gone up. Those prices are likely higher now. So this is where we land on our expectation that we'll see less than 5 ADUs built per year. One area of concern that we've heard, so now I'm just going to talk about some of these areas of concerns, is that ADUs will be loud, a nuisance, either as an Airbnb or hangout for teens. So I want to emphasize that the proposed legislation would have an owner occupancy requirement. As everybody knows, if you're on your property, you pay more attention to it. We've added the conditional use permit piece, so that way, if there's really a problematic ADU, the conditional use permit could always be revoked. I want to emphasize that existing nuisance codes would still address noise and problematic behavior. And then the current short-term rental legislation, we're recommending that ADUs are not allowed to be short-term rentals in that legislation. Another concern is that ADUs will have a negative neighborhood impact from increased density, either through traffic, property values. I want to emphasize that ADUs provide a form of gentle density, meaning optically, it will still look like a garage. This proposal is not allowing a home to be rebuilt as an apartment. We think that, again, that less than 5 ADUs will be built every year. Overall, we feel that the community benefits outweigh the negatives. There's this saying here, one person staying in Cleveland Heights justifies this. Our people are what makes our city so special, and we want to retain them as much as we can. I think we've gone over this already, but I just want to emphasize that the conditional use permit, that piece, and that the permission to use an ADU could be revoked by Planning Commission. Pass it back to Book.
Thank you. We've sort of gone all over this already as well, but the completed steps so far have been City Council. They introduced the ordinance July 6th. They referred it to the Planning Commission for consideration and recommendation. We're currently reviewing it for recommendation, and that will go back to City Council. And upcoming steps include a workshop with the Planning and Development Committee with City Council that has not, they don't have dates yet, but there'll also be a public hearing by council for the second reading and a potential action by council after the public hearing as well. And staff recommendations include 2 amendments to the current text. One is clarifying the size limit for lots that are exactly 6,000 square feet in area. We discussed the size limits for those that are lower than or under 6,000 square feet and above 6,000 square feet, but we wanted to clarify that for those that are exactly 6,000 square feet. And then a second amendment that just includes language for deed restrictions that basically explains that we don't enforce deed restrictions, but that an ADU shouldn't be constructed if it's in violation of that. And just to guide public comments, specifics are the most helpful. So for example, saying I don't want to see ADUs allowed in Cleveland Heights is not the most helpful. Explaining or clarifying that it's because you're concerned about privacy and noise in the backyard is better. And clarifying further that you would encourage the Planning Commission to recommend that City Council increases the required setback to 10 feet would be even more helpful to inform any code changes that we discussed tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brooke. Xavier, that was well informing, your comments and presentation. Are there any questions from the commission for staff at this point? Jessica?
Did I catch that a basement conversion is no longer being considered?
Yeah, that's correct. So the current legislation would only allow attached or detached. So those internal type of ADUs, that's what a basement conversion is considered. Yeah. That wouldn't be allowed. Also, something like converting your attic into a third unit, that would not be allowed.
Could you dive a little more into the rationale behind that decision to move forward without encouraging the use of existing buildings?
Yeah, I think at this point in time, we felt that would be a more conservative approach and something that would be more palatable to the community.
So if I understand what you're saying, that we could change that in the future anytime that we chose to do so.
Of course, yeah, zoning is living and breathing.
Living and breathing document. Thank you. Bob?
Just 2 quick ones here. I see that it says the property owner shall occupy either the principal dwelling or the ADU as their primary residence. So in other words, an absentee-owned house with the owner not living on the property would not be permitted to have an ADU.
Correct.
Okay. Just want to clarify that. I don't object. I just wanted to make sure I was understanding that. And then the other thing, if the garage is converted to an ADU, either all or part of the garage, what does that do to the parking requirement that could be, not met if part of the required parking becomes an ADU? I was confused about that.
Yep.
It's a new criterion. We're suggesting that it become a new criterion for requesting a reduction in required enclosed parking.
So someone would still need to provide 2 parking spaces on their property, but they wouldn't necessarily need to be in the garage. You could have 1 in the garage, you could have 1 on the driveway.
So like a parking pad.
Right. So if the property before the ADU was established required 2 parking spaces, and once the ADU is added, would it require a 3rd parking space or not?
So right now we're not proposing requiring another parking space for the ADU.
And it's possible, of course, if that ADU is for an elderly person who might be a family member. That person may not drive. I mean, it's at least a possibility.
That's right. And it wasn't directly responding to a question, but we wanted to preserve the flexibility for people to build that parking space if they would like to. So we're allowing, up to 200 square feet you can add that to your garage, the maximum allowed to your garage if you build an ADU as well. So if somebody wants 3 parking spaces, they could add that too.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, just a couple of questions. So you mentioned that we switched this to a conditional use. What was the response rate of concern that led you to that decision?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So what percentage of respondents responded negatively, saying that they would like it to be more of a conditional use where we might be able to look at this in more detail?
You're talking about perhaps the ADU, responses to the ADU survey?
Yeah.
So we didn't directly look at I'm not sure I have that.
Okay. That's okay.
We would have to report back to you on that, on how many comments mentioned a conditional use permit.
Okay.
I think it was included just because we wanted to give people the, I guess, comfort of knowing that if there were issues, it became a nuisance or something to the community, that we could bring it back for discussion and review.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that. I'm just saying in general, I think that for the most part, I think we want more things to be by right, and ADU by definition, and it's an accessory to an actual use. So we would hope that something like this can be by right in the future, but understanding that residents have concerns and we do have a community that we plan for that has and wants different things. Another question I had was there's the lot coverage of 60%, and you said that there's going to be a lot of different folks who have different square footage metrics that they're going to have to hit. Is there like a map? Because part of the ADU planning is that this should be predictable so that folks, when they're applying, maybe know exactly what their square footage might be in advance. So are there going to be tools and whatnot set aside for residents?
I think that one thing that we're looking at is using our zoning map, Gridix, which already provides residents when they look at their property details. But that would be an area to explore if we could let people know how much pervious area they already have.
Yeah.
And then just, sorry, to go back to your previous question, I don't know if this directly answers it, but so we had 645 responses on the survey. 47 of those responses mentioned some concern about short-term rentals, absentee landlords, or renter behavior. So that's 47 out of 645. So that's part of where we got the response of the conditional use permit.
Okay. And then third question, I think I saw at the end that it said still subject to rental inspections. Does that mean that these will still theoretically be rentable properties?
That's right. So if there's the owner occupant requirement, so if somebody lives in the primary dwelling or the ADU, they could rent their ADU or the home.
Okay. And that includes short-term rentals? Like theoretically, they could rent it out via Airbnb?
So our proposal, it's not in this legislation, but what we've recommended for the short-term rental registration is that short-term rentals are not permitted in the ADU.
Got it. Okay, cool.
Thank you for asking.
I have a comment. This might help clarify why we're doing this in terms of a conditional use permit. I don't think anybody's been on this commission as long as I have, but way back when we started allowing chicken coops. Yeah. And for about 5 years, I think they came before the commission for approval with site plans and neighbor approval and all of that kind of stuff. And it took us a long time to make it a regular planning department process as opposed to a conditional use permit while we worked all the kinks out of it and let it run for 5 or 6 years before we said, okay, it's normalized, we know what we're doing. I think it's a wise move to do it in this case where we're going to scrutinize everything we're doing for the first several years and make sure we're not creating a problem that we need to tweak down the road. And it worked well with chicken coops. I never hear about them anymore. I hear about the chickens and I get eggs given to me now and then, but anyways, I think that's the reason that we do it. Matt?
One question for staff about the owner occupancy requirement. My sense is that this could possibly interfere with a sale or conveyance, especially if, imagine you have an inheritance, the owner occupant like passes away of one of these buildings. Is the, heir then required to move to this place and occupy the unit? And if they don't, then that they'll have to sell it to an owner occupant, which will reduce the market for that property, which could seriously reduce the property value of these. So I, do question what will happen in circumstances like that, and if we've, maybe thought about that and what effect that will have on the property values in Cleveland Heights.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So, there is, the property could continue to be vacant, right? I think if the property is sold to an heir, like you mentioned, and they don't intend to live on the property, then nobody could be living on the property and nobody could be living in the ADU, and they would be compliant with the owner-occupant requirement.
Okay. So you would just be forced to keep one of the units vacant if you didn't want to rent it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, hypothetically speaking, since this is a good question, I would, this is going to happen sometime in the first 5 years of us doing this. It seems to me that the house could be marketed and sold to a new owner who owns the main property and continues to rent to a tenant who might potentially be in there, whether it's Aunt Mildred or whether it's just somebody who's renting the property through, legally through our code and so forth and compliance. And I think that's something we'd have to work on as a department and as a commission in terms of, is somebody going to have to come before us and tell us what's going on and let us know how long it's going to take and what their intentions are. And we may very well grant a period of time for them, for example, to sell the property and a new owner come in who wants to take it over. Because chances are, if they don't want to have an ADU with the tenant in their yard, they're probably not going to buy the property. And so I think it's probably a pretty good chance that it would just turn over on the sale. And if I was buying the house, it was coming with a tenant in the backyard. And I don't think I'd buy it if I didn't want that. Anybody else?
If the ADU were attached as part of the house, I would assume a new owner who didn't want an ADU could just incorporate it into the house.
They do the same thing.
Yeah, through an interior change,
Ken, I'm sorry, you were going to say something?
Not related to this.
Go ahead.
Is your
Sure.
point still related to this?
No, it's a separate point.
Go ahead with your.
Sure. Okay. So I had a question about the 5-foot setback. So that's going to be for every structure, whether new built or renovation, correct?
That's correct.
Which would mean that there are many garages which are less than 5 feet away from the property line right now. I think about, I am a former Belfield resident, but there's some streets over there that have properties and garages which go very close to the property lines. Potentially hundreds, maybe more, properties are going to be rendered ineligible then to create the ADUs by that requirement. So I wonder if there's any possibility for us to say that if you're renovating an existing garage, that setback wouldn't be required. Because if we do, my sense is that the 5 ADUs per year is actually a very optimistic estimate for how many of these are actually going to be built. If there's a property where the stars do align, where you have an interested and capable person who owns a property wants to build one of these, I think that we really want to get out of their way as much as possible, but we could be making it illegal for them to do it unless they demolish their garage and then build like a new structure, which is going to be much more expensive and harder to do.
Yeah, I think Brooker will correct me if I'm wrong. Should Planning Commission want to do that, that could be part of your resolution as a recommendation when you pass the legislation back to council.
I mean, I think that to differentiate between new construction of an ADU versus conversion of an existing building, like a garage to an ADU, I could see where the ordinance should say, if it's an existing building that's closer to the lot line than a new building would be, so be it. I mean, the building's already there, and to say, you know, you're ineligible to convert it to an ADU because it's 2 feet from a lot line would mean a lot of properties could not have an ADU in the garage. I mean, I know on my street, almost all the garages are under 5 feet from the lot line.
I do also want to mention, you know, you could adopt that as part of your resolution. You know, we also do have a zoning variance procedure within the city. You know, should that be the case where somebody's converting a garage, it's less than the 5 feet, they could apply for a zoning variance.
I would tend to think if the building has been there, of course, if it's there, it's probably been there a long time, that going through a variance process is probably overkill. That's just my thought.
Furthermore, I think that variances should be reserved for, you know, more unpredictable cases. But since we see this one coming, and if the Planning Commission is comfortable with recommending this change and we feel it would be appropriate, I think it would be better to not push them through the variance process as well. Because as we said, these ADUs are quite expensive to construct, and you're adding cost of, like, I don't know, having like a lawyer or consultant or something, an architect, an engineer, come to the Planning Commission meeting, now also asking for zoning variance. And, you know, the more of these requirements that you stack onto this, the costs and the time to build them gets higher and higher and higher.
Realistically, though, I'm not sure what, if any, how many garages would be structurally feasible for conversion based on the age of most of our garages. We previously passed the garage removal thing the other year because of that, you know, they're obsolete. People want to add a larger structure. People want green space. So, I mean, I think that's kind of like what we're saying is if we have an existing building, yes, that should be, you know, considered. But the reality of most of our garages being sufficient is slim.
My garage would take exception to that. It's very insulting.
We've got a question over here. Can we?
This is related to.
Is this related? Okay,
Yes.
Continue.
So just because this might not be applicable to most cases doesn't mean, I think, that we should make it illegal in the city to do a garage conversion. Maybe there's only one that fits this criteria and has like the interested you know, builder and owner and everything. And if that's the case, I wouldn't want to have the zoning code say that they couldn't do it just because we thought like, oh, there's probably not that many people who would have a structure that would be appropriate for this.
Well, I think it's the issue of 5 feet versus 2 feet are at the lot line. And so if we're thinking conservatively, which this is doing, then suggesting that just because you have a garage that you may or may not be able to convert can be closer, you know, as a preference, seems like we should be more considerate of if we're creating new ADU spaces, that should be the emphasis of this because they're not considering converting interior ADUs.
This would be only for the existing structures, though. So this would be no less conservative for the new construction units.
Right. I think it makes sense to allow an existing legally built structure to be converted without going through a variance process. I mean, that building's already there, you know.
I mean, I'll just add that I agree with that that statement that we should make it easier for existing structures already. But my other question was really around design guidelines. I know we did the competitions and had some kind of designs that were pre-approved. I don't see anything related to that in here. Are there still thoughts of having some pre-approved? And part of this is just thinking make it easier for people to come up with ADUs without necessarily having to go through all the cost of additional architects and all that stuff. So is that still part of the plan?
Yep, so that is still part of the broader picture. It seems unlikely at this time with our architectural board that we'll actually have them comfortable with a set of plans that are pre-approved. They've said they're willing to consider plans that are pre-reviewed, meaning they still need to go to them before it's being built, you know, to see the context of the site. But those will be available to homeowners. And I think we'll help people in the sense that if you want to know what, you should have some certainty about those designs going through the architectural board review process because they've already been looked at by that board. A lot of people have uncertainty because we know it because we go through it a lot, but homeowners, obviously, you might go to the board once or twice, so you might feel anxious about that.
I'm still stuck on the existing, because if we're going to bat for a garage, then why not the existing primary dwelling?
I'm sorry, in what sense?
That it should be allowable without, because at this point, they would be passing it without that consideration.
I would be supportive of recommending that they allow the basement units as well.
Anyone else? I'm trying to make a note here that we're going to maybe include with our recommendations to allow for some flexibility in these type cases. Thank you. Okay, if we're done with our comments and discussion, there's plenty of people here in the audience who are looking, and I see Joe raising his hand. He's going to come up first. Yeah. I tell you what, how many people are here to make comments? How about if you all stand right now together and we'll swear you all in one time for efficiency.
I do.
Thank you. Joe, if you could identify yourself.
It's Tom Zich. I live at 2669 Edge Hill Road, Cleveland Heights. I'll identify myself as the chair of the Board of Zoning Appeals, though I'm not speaking on behalf of the Board of Zoning Appeals. I'm just one member, one voice out of the five of us. Just some background, and far be it for me to ask that our caseload be increased gratuitously, but there is an expertise on the Board of Zoning Appeals that's easily applied. It is not uncommon, as Xavier knows, for cases to come before the board where existing structures are increased, enhanced, right, enlarged. Not as an accessory dwelling unit, but as part of the principal dwelling unit. We see that all the time. There is an issue when that is within the otherwise allowable setback, right? You convert a garage, we see garages turned into studios, we see garages turned into workshops, we see garages turned into extra bedrooms, right? You get a second floor, right? The second floor, or those kind of expansions, create potential burdens on neighboring properties that otherwise wouldn't be there. We look at where the windows are, we look at where the lighting is. So I don't see, if one has already hired an engineer to build the structure, right? Already hired an architect to do all of that, and that's done. Again, I don't want, gratuitous burdens on our citizens, but it gives the city, through an organ of the city, the opportunity, right? When you're into what would otherwise be a permittable setback, and it may be grandfathered, it's been there before, that's why that's within the setback, that's just the character of the neighborhood. But when you're adding a substantial new use, right, that impinges upon the setback, that has potential effects on the neighbors, right? Backyard, side yard, especially in side yards, especially on the close house-to-house connections. And so I would think, and again, I'm not asking that our workload necessarily have to increase, but there is a process that is well used and the staff well manages that allows the city, in this case with the Board of Zoning Appeals, we grant variances to setbacks, right? Not willy-nilly, but it happens all the time. And that you build in that protection for the neighbors. You put in that protection for the neighborhood so that these accessory dwelling units, for all of their benefits, aren't going to have a negative impact on the, and if they're 5 feet or more off the set, fine. You only come before the Board of Zoning Appeals when you need a variance to existing code. We don't change zoning, right? But if you're going to have the incursion into the setback that substantially increases the potential impact of that incursion, from our point of view, we believe there's a benefit to the city to have that process. And if someone is investing that much money in it, I don't see that, I don't think, and easy for me to say, but I don't see it as a substantial additional burden on the project.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Larry? Or I'm sorry, Chuck?
Thank you for this opportunity for the public discussion on ADUs in Cleveland Heights.
Chuck.
My name is Chuck Miller. I'm an architect. I have lived at 3368 Mayfield Road for 43 years. In one sentence, Cleveland Heights needs more small, energy efficient, easy to maintain, lifestyle adaptable, beautiful homes. For the 2023 census, Cleveland Heights households are 39% people living alone and 34% people living with a single spouse or partner. And about 60% of those households are tax-paying homeowners. So we have some very small households that need small homes. I hope the members of the Planning Commission have had a chance to review the email and illustrations I sent through the city staff regarding the hypothetical aging Cleveland Heights couple needing new accommodations. It showed how a detached ADU would work as a best option for them to remain with their property by sharing it with younger family members. That's an option that offered huge benefits for both generations, personally and financially. I only want to reiterate that any ADU that meets all of the requirements for size, height, setback, yard areas, and gets approval from the ABR should not have the added burden of a 75-day wait period for a public hearing because it's a conditional use. If it means all the same limitations as any house addition, it should be approved in the same way. I'd also like to have us recognize that families and households today come in all shapes and sizes, including multi-generational ones who seek site sharing opportunities. Our city should live up to its reputation as a welcoming community for all. Tax-paying home buying families today need better options available to them as compared to homes built in the 20s, 30s, or even the 60s. So I ask, please say yes to the ADUs in Cleveland Heights. Please say no to ADUs as a conditional use. Thank you.
Karen Lash, I live on Monticello. I am against ADUs. Let me start by saying I am one of those single people in a house that is a colonial, and the stairs are starting to become a major problem for me. But I don't want an ADU, and I'll tell you why. First of all, I'm concerned about, well, let me just ask a question. Was it that, I just want to make sure I understand correctly, the lot has to be at least 6,000 feet in order to build an ADU? Is that correct?
You want to respond?
Yeah. Yes, please.
So all lots would be eligible within Cleveland Heights, but there's a coverage requirement that you have to maintain. And then also a maximum lot size, or and then a maximum size of the ADU in addition to that coverage requirement.
Okay. All right, well, number one, I think that's ugly as anything. Looking at the house from the front and seeing this other thing on the side. But that's just my opinion. One of the things that I'm concerned about is people go to build this or take a garage, you'll be getting variance requests left and right. I know that it's not, B&Bs are not allowed for this situation, but who's going to police that? Who's going to stop people from, renting it out to people without declaring that it's a B&B? Also, I think it's very wrong to not require parking. Yes, there's lots of cases where people living in the ADU would not need or use a car. But there's probably way more that do. So now you're either going to have a driveway that's loaded with cars. I just think it's wrong to not require at least one parking space. I can't even read my own writing. Oh, yeah, I want to know how this is going to impact our infrastructure. Is separate utilities and sewers and all of this need to be built, or is it all going to run through the existing house? And how is it going to tax our systems in the city as they are with the great sewer system that we have? Oh, yeah, so, and I wanted to know where the utilities would come from, so it's kind of the same question. How are taxes going to be paid? Who's going to be responsible for the taxes on those properties? Oh, I don't think that 5-foot setback is enough. I think it should be more, because I'm thinking of my own yard, which is not huge. My little rickety one-car garage is right by the line of my neighbors on behind me and next to me. So if somebody were to move in there, yes, there's consideration for noise, light, all of that. I think 5 feet is not enough. Also, in terms of having home-based businesses, I would like to see some kind of regulation, like I don't want to see a business where they would be having customers come to them, like a hairdresser or a therapist or something like that. There's tons of people that work from home, and that's great. As long as you're the one working and nobody else is coming to on a regular basis to interact with you. Okay, I've said that. And, and I absolutely would not want to see basements become ADUs. Then we would have no control over anything. So I hope that you really consider everything before you pass this. Thank you.
Thank you. Lou?
My name's Lou Radovojevich. I live on Middlehurst Road. I'm still on the fence with this topic of ADUs, and I've given it a lot of thought, and I definitely thank the planning department for all their outreach efforts. I think I've chatted with the two of you more than 4 or 5 times, so that was awesome. That's the way it should be done for any of these type of topics. But I guess every time I've always lived in Cleveland Heights, in the 3 homes that I've lived for the last 50 years, what I've loved most about Cleveland Heights is that my front yard and my front porch is how I can have this urban community engagement. And my backyard is when I can have my privacy and I can have a little bit of this country style living with all the trees and the canopy that's there. And that's what I'm always looking to protect. Just so you understand, what I don't understand is this. My next door neighbor built an ADU within the last 4 years. Now you might argue and say that's not an ADU, but I can tell you they knocked down the original garage, they built a new 2-car garage, and they built a dwelling unit next to it using the current conditional program that you have in place. And that was perfect. It's my understanding that the only thing that separates that from an ADU is it the power that goes into the house? Is it the fact that he's got to use a microwave rather than having a Viking stove, or he doesn't have 220? That is so irrelevant as a neighbor, how they cook and what they need internally. Everything that was currently done to that garage, to that dwelling unit, I've experienced for the last 4 years. I get to see it daily. I get to ask questions about a lot of what ifs. And I've got an awesome neighbor. I mean, the best neighbors in the whole wide world, very respectful. But what if they move? I will never, ever have neighbors next to me as good as they are. And so I'm always looking at this situation. And so, you know, one of the key things that I notice is just the light pollution at night. You never see slide decks showing anything at night. It's always daytime photographs. It's a beautiful night tonight. I highly recommend everybody to go in their backyards, just sit back there, look at the night, look at your garage, look at your neighbor's garage to your left, and look to the right. And just visualize an 80-inch TV set glowing in those garages. And just tell me what your experience will be like from what you're used to. So that, to me, is an important element. Another thing is I have a shared driveway. I'd like to know what we're going to do with shared driveways. You know, how many shared driveways exist in Cleveland Heights? But that is going to completely be a challenge if myself or my neighbors decides to have accessory dwelling units. You know, another thing is my observation, I don't know how many of you have your bedrooms in the back of your house. My bedroom is in the back of my house, and the distance between my house and the back of the house on Wilton is perfect. It's plenty of distance. So the thought of having another dwelling unit with eyes and ears on the 50-yard line encroaches on my privacy. And then the question I have is that if I understand it with ADUs, as long as they follow the criteria that is given to them, as a neighbor, I can't deny, or I can't stand up and say, we don't want that ADU to exist, that it has to happen. So in that case, I'm looking at worst case scenarios. I'm asking, I know you say no more than 5 will be built, but that's just, you know, it doesn't, let's presume that there's going to be more. So how do we handle when we've got back-to-back ADUs? What does that look like? I don't know. I've never seen anybody showing me that. It's always just the house by itself. But I'd like to see what that would look like on a block. You know, and I guess that's where I'm at. You know, everything else, who knows, you know, where we go from there. But those are just some of my observations, just seeing it every day and asking myself, what if?
Anybody else here like to address the commission? Seeing no additional comments, any further thoughts from the commission?
You know, with respect to the need for a variance, I certainly understand if someone is building a new building as an ADU. And certainly they would, you know, if they're closer to the lot line than the code allows, that would require a variance. If someone's taking an existing building on the lot and converting that to an ADU, and of course the building is where it is, I wonder what the rationale is for saying, oh, you're going to need to go to the BZA for a variance. The building's already there, and maybe it's a garage now, and there are cars coming in and out of it, and you want to have it as an accessory dwelling unit. What would be the public purpose of requiring a variance in that case where it's an existing building? I can think of something, but I'm not sure what it, you know, I'm not sure what the thought process is of requiring the variance for an existing building being converted. Yeah, asking the question. Yeah, I guess of staff. Yeah. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you know, one piece that the commission may consider, you know, the recommendation that you've considered so far would be any existing structure, it sounds like. You may consider garages that are code conforming distance, meaning that garages that are already 3 feet away, perhaps they can be allowed to be converted to an ADU. If that's an existing garage, you know, perhaps there's concern about opening the door up to all existing garages, because everybody knows that, you know, in Cleveland Heights, we're Old City, we have garages that are a foot away from the property line. We have garages that are 2 feet away from the property line. That could be an option to consider.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to reiterate a point that Commissioner Kushner and the gentleman in the front row here had brought up about the need for conditional use permits for every single ADU. And Mr. Chair, take your point about that potentially being a initial process that might be removed later on, as staff said, living, breathing document for the zoning code. But I did want to point out that I was doing some research beforehand, and I did see that the AARP and the APA in their published ADU guidance both recommend removing Planning Commission review for residential ADUs because the guidance favors clear and predictable standards, which are easy to interpret and yet don't need to go before the discretionary body like this one about whether or not they might be approved. So it makes it faster and more predictable and ultimately cheaper to do these. And I do want to say, somebody who works in my day job in development finance, that time is a killer of deals, and people who are building or renovating an ADU in their backyard are in a sense becoming a small real estate developer, and adding a 75-day waiting period can be a significant burden for a project. So maybe now isn't necessarily the time to remove that requirement, but I do want to keep that top of mind, that if the program is going reasonably well, that is something that we should revisit expeditiously.
I fully support that. We've with Severance and other larger developments that, we've created path for means for larger developers to have streamlined access to profit. So I feel like smaller, like you said, real estate developers should have the same access.
Okay.
Yeah, so I took a couple notes. There was a question about infrastructure and utility connections for ADUs. So, I think that it depends on the type of utility that's being connected. It seems that many of them can be connected to the primary home. It seems like that is the most, the cheapest option from the research that we've done. But then also, if somebody's on a corner property, they may want to connect to the city water line directly. And then in general, the impact on the infrastructure, it's worth remembering that we were a city built out for 60,000 people. We're down to 45,000 roughly now. We do have an aging infrastructure. So that should all be kept in mind in the conversation about additional residents. There was a question about taxes, so there would still be, there would still be the taxes charged to the home and one property. The ADU wouldn't have a separate tax. There was a question about home-based businesses. So I think we've gotten some questions about that as well. So it's worth reminding everybody that a home-based business in an accessory building like a garage requires a conditional use permit. Our home-based businesses, as they are now, are pretty restrictive on when people can come and go. For example, people can only come to the property between 9 and 5 p.m. on weekdays and 9 and 12 p.m. On Saturday. That's the current legislation for home-based businesses. So that, and then if someone had an home-based business in their ADU, right, because it'd be conditionally permitted, Planning Commission could further restrict those hours should they see fit. And then, so there was a question, about, if an ADU is proposed, when can neighbors voice opposition? So, as proposed, if there was a conditional use permit requirement, that would have a public hearing, and that could be an appropriate forum for neighbors to oppose it. And then also, if the ADU gets constructed, Planning Commission is another body to address concerns around problematic tenants. That permission to have the ADU in the dwelling unit could be revoked in the future. So just wanted to reiterate that. I think those were the major questions. Thank you.
Is your microphone on?
I'm sensitive to the point Lou made and also to what Chuck made. From my 10 years on the Planning Commission, I like having the conditional use permit process because it does slow things down. I agree. And as we venture into this endeavor, if council decides to approve this and move this on and make it part of our codified ordinances, I would feel most comfortable having this body involved or the city involved, monitoring these permits and so forth, and making sure that we don't create situations that we regret, where we don't adequately review an ADU that gets built, and then all of a sudden we've got a problem 8 months later of the neighborhood being very upset about what ended up looking at everybody's houses from around there. So I think the review process that we put things through when we do something new like this is a good process to put in place initially to make sure we don't make missteps and make mistakes in neighborhoods that are hard to undo. So that's my own personal thought about that. As far as proceeding and making a recommendation back to council, which is what we're here to do tonight, I'm fine with the ordinance as it's been drawn up and shown to me, and I think everybody else here has seen this. We could take a vote on removing the conditional use permit requirement, or pre-approving, or the restrictions on garages on the property line. Personally, I'm not comfortable with that, and I'd probably vote against it. But if the majority rules, I'm okay with that. So I'd just like to know where we're at as a commission in terms of, are we ready to go ahead and make a motion to refer the ordinance back to council for next steps as outlined that we've got scheduled here over the next 2 months? Anyone?
I may need staff to help me refine the language on this motion, but if I could just make a motion to, what would it be, like amend our recommendation to council, taking one at a time. The first being the removing the setback requirement for existing structures that are converted into an ADU. So removing the 5-foot setback requirement for existing structures. Is that okay, the way that's phrased?
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
Were you saying remove the setback requirement entirely, or just like if it's 3 feet, like if there's a 3-foot setback or above, or?
For an existing structure, it's removing entirely, just allowing it to stay where it is.
Just for an existing.
Only for an existing structure, not for new construction.
And a conversion, not adding on.
Yes, conversion. Conversion of an existing structure.
And just a minor detail, did you mean to say existing building instead of existing structure? Because that existing structure would also include like a fence or a pergola. A building would be something with 4 walls and a roof.
Fair enough. We'll say building. I don't think a fence could be converted to an ADU, though. That would be very thin.
What do we pay you?
But okay, existing building.
Yeah. Okay. Was there another one that anybody wanted to put up there? Let me just ask for clarification. We've had talk of removing the conditional use permit requirement for this process. Is there anybody who wants to do that? Jessica, you had brought that up.
I'd be in favor of considering that.
Again, for existing buildings.
For existing buildings. Yeah.
Just for existing buildings.
Correct.
Okay. And just a point of clarification, when we refer this back to council, if we make a change on this ordinance that council decides they don't want to go along with, they can change it back to what it was. We're just making a recommendation.
Exactly.
Okay. I'm fine with that. So we want to add a second change to that we're removing the conditional use permit for existing buildings. And we'll let Mr. Kuda and his crew wrestle with that.
For an existing building, if it's a garage, there was noise coming from the garage. Cars in there, people work in their garage.
Garage bands.
Wasn't going that far, but so I'm just saying a garage is not necessarily a quiet neighbor either.
May I ask the question, does that include recommendation to reconsider the primary dwelling unit conversion, the interior conversion? Or is that specific to just?
That would be a third.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be a third thing. But I don't think this really pertains to, converting attics and basements. I mean, people could finish their basements and.
But they're not able to legally include that when they're selling or for the value that they would need to do that.
Right.
Particularly in Cleveland Heights when we have such a volatile market.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's fine.
As it's drafted now, if someone has a house that is closer to the lot line than and they want to convert a portion of their house. The way it require a variance.
That would even be a use variance, because, so not even your standard variance. So that'd be converting the property to a multifamily building.
Okay.
And would need a use variance.
Okay, even though it's an ADU, it's not a. Got
Yeah.
it.
Okay, so I think we've clarified that we want to add 2 changes or additions to the proposed ordinance, that we're going to be removing the setback requirement for an existing non-conforming building that's already there. And existing legally non-conforming building, and for removing the conditional use permit requirement, again, for a conditional non-conforming building. Maybe we could combine that into one statement. Would that be acceptable? So we'd basically just be adding one line to the document that you've given to me. That we take those 2 particular situations and removing the setback requirement for those legally non-complying buildings and the conditional use permit for those non-complying but legally existing buildings. So just one statement like that. You want me to draft that as part of this document, or have you got that?
I think we have it.
You have it? Okay, because then I'll put a note on here when I sign this.
Yes.
If the commission approves it as we've done, that you're going to add the language to the document. Yes, and it's all up to council. It's not like we're passing the legislation ourselves. So if we're good, could we go ahead and have a motion to move forward from this point? And we'll need a motion on project number 2607. Who would like to make it? Matt?
It's a motion to refer legislation back to council with recommendations as amended.
Could you include adoption of the resolution too?
Oh, and adoption of the resolution.
Okay. All in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, we need a second.
I'll second.
Okay. And we'll take it to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Hearing no news or no opposition, I think the proposed zoning code amendments with the one change that we've put through passes on to council. Thank you very much for everybody's patience with the discussion. I think it was very good and very helpful. And thank all of you for attending this evening. No one else is required to stay at this point, but we do have some old business and new business we're going to be discussing. Tony, are you sticking around? Tony, are you okay, I'd like to see you afterwards. Old business?
One other thing, I think when we're paragraph, we didn't get a second.
Oh, I thought somebody did second that motion. Yeah. Yeah, I thought, didn't you second that motion? Yeah.
Just for the record.
Yeah.
I don't recall it saying.
Yeah, okay. You're the second on that motion. Thank you for catching that.
I could be wrong, but.
That's okay. At this point, I think it's settled. All right, is there some old business that we need to discuss?
I do not have any old business.
Okay. I have just a couple of things myself. As all of you know, I've been pushing for a sidewalk to be built on Warrensville Road, and I'm going to go more public on that later this year, trying to campaign to get that on council's radar. But something else cropped up a couple of weeks ago, a lengthy article in the New York Times about the rise in pedestrian deaths around the country. I don't know how many of you saw the article, but it was in depth. And it was something that I kind of inherently knew as I looked around at the size of the vehicles out there, but never really had demonstrated as clearly as I saw it in this article in the Times, where it also include video depictions, AI generated or computer generated, of the loss of visibility of pedestrians in the large vehicles that dominate traffic today. And I'll put it in perspective very quickly. I stopped driving sedans 6 years ago because I got tired of looking at the grills of other vehicles and looking at their headlights, not realizing how dangerous the front end of these vehicles are to other drivers in smaller cars and to pedestrians that are struck by these vehicles inadvertently in a crosswalk. And I was good at geometry in high school, and I never thought about this. When you take the hood of a sedan, which is 27 inches typically off the ground, and it clips me, I'm 6 feet tall, I'm gonna go up on the hood, maybe roll over the top or whatever, but I'm probably gonna live. But if I'm hit by a truck or a big SUV with a 55-inch level for that hood off the ground, I'm gonna be struck and knocked down and run over. And that's what's been happening a lot in the last 20 years as our country has gone in the other direction, away from fuel efficiency and all those things we thought we wanted to do, and built bigger and heavier and higher cars that now have been linked to a dramatic increase in pedestrian fatalities around the country. I mean, we've had 3 here in Cleveland Heights in like the last 3 years, which has got me very concerned about this. And now I'm thinking even more about the visibility issues at our crosswalks. I go down Coventry almost every day by Heights Hardware, and there's parked cars and so forth. I come to a stop and look both ways to make sure. You know, one of the recommendations in that article is that communities, we can't change what the manufacturers are doing. That's up to the federal government, but we can try to do whatever we can to make it safer for our pedestrians to be seen by these larger vehicles, because people feel safe in them. They feel very protected, but they're literally driving around in vehicles that are built like tanks. And they're safe, but the rest of us have been endangered by this, and it really became clear to me in this article. And so I made copies of I did a summary of the article, and then with a link to the New York Times article for all of you to look at, just to get it on people's radars of what we need to be thinking about in the planning department, perhaps, about enhancing pedestrian safety. You know, I've long been saying I'd like to see those yellow flashing lights turn to red when a pedestrian pushes the button. I think that's something we need to seriously consider doing. And I think we need to make sure that all our crosswalks have good visibility now that I know how much the visibility is paired in front of the vehicle and through these massive, they call them the A-pillars that hold the roofs up, which because of the size and weight of these vehicles are way bigger than they used to be. And that one instant where somebody moves into your blind spot can be fatal for people. And so I'd encourage folks to take a look at this article, and I've included the link on it for the New York Times article that you can go to take a look at this and see what y'all think. There's 3 copies that way. And I've got some for you folks there. And I have some for you over here. So that's all I wanted to bring up in the way of new business, and I am seriously on the warpath about pedestrian safety. So Joe, I've got one for you. You've read it, thank you. Thank you for reading it.
If I could add one thing there, and I don't know how to deal with this, but often dangerous pedestrians when, and actually vehicles, when parked cars are allowed so close to the intersection, and if someone pulling into that road from the side street,
Yeah.
the oncoming traffic, I mean, so I live on Hampshire, blocks up the hill from Coventry. Every time I go down the hill to Coventry, I have to really edge out carefully because the parked car is blocking my view of the oncoming traffic.
Yes,
I don't know what
that's,
you do except to reduce the amount of on-street parking so that the parking space is a little bit away from the intersection. Lose the value of parking.
yeah, Bob, and I agree with you because that intersection is the one that I find the hardest to see the sidewalks and so forth. And I totally sympathize with you, and I think it's something that council and the planning department needs to really take a good, hard look at. Matt?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for raising this extremely important issue as somebody who is an avid pedestrian, who has children who play on the sidewalk regularly. I think pedestrian safety is extremely important. And then I'd also like to piggyback on top of that and say cyclist safety is also something that I'd like to put on people's radars as well. Yeah, but thank you very much for raising this issue.
I saw an electric bike rider wearing a helmet on the way as I was driving over to this meeting on Lee Road, 25 miles an hour at least in regular traffic on Lee Road, holding a toddler.
Oh, no.
And I just thought, this is, we've become insane in terms of public safety sometimes and think this stuff is just all normal. And we need to wake up and do something about it to protect ourselves, so.
And motorists observing the crosswalks.
Yeah,
is
well,
probably 50-50.
that's a huge part.
I walk in the road across that same section every day. It's like I go halfway, one side stops, the other side doesn't stop, so, stop in the middle of the intersection, let the car go through the crosswalk and, whatever.
All right, anybody have anything else? If not, we shall officially adjourn this meeting at 9:01 PM. Thank you, everyone, for your time.